In the endless flow of human history, there are stories that rise to the surface not just because of the events they recount, but because of the profound lessons they carry about morality, humanity, and the decline of society. These stories don't just reflect the era in which they occurred, but also create enduring standards that can guide us through modern life. One such story can be found in the book of Judges in the Old Testament, specifically in chapters 19 to 21, where a series of dark events unfold during a time when Israel had no king. This isn't a story that's easy to hear. In fact, it might leave you feeling unsettled and disturbed. But it's precisely this discomfort that makes it so important for us to listen, reflect, and learn from it. A detailed analysis of the story. The story begins with a Levite living in the hill country of Ephraim, a remote and isolated region. This Levite had taken a concubine from Bethlehem, but the concubine was unfaithful and returned to her father's house. This created a conflict in their relationship, reflecting not only a fracture in their marriage, but also the signs of a society losing its fundamental moral values. The Levite and his concubine. The story begins when the Levite decides to go after his concubine after she had returned to her father's house. This action represents an effort to mend their relationship, but also serves as a symbol of the societal stagnation of that time. The Levite, despite being hurt by her betrayal, set aside his pride and tried to bring her back. This action could be seen as a gesture of love or responsibility, but it also raises questions about autonomy and equality within relationships. The fateful journey. On their journey back from Bethlehem, the Levite, his concubine, and his servant stopped in Gibeah, a town within the tribe of Benjamin. This is where the story takes a darker turn. In ancient Israelite society, hospitality was a crucial value, but in Gibeah, no one offered them shelter. This wasn't just a breach of social norms, but also a sign of moral decay. Eventually, an old man invited them into his home, but this only added more drama to the unfolding events. Assault and tragedy. As night fell, a group of men from Gibeah surrounded the old man's house and demanded that he hand over the Levite so they could humiliate him. What follows is a horrific scene, not only because of the violence, but because of the way the Levite and the old man treated the woman. They sent the Levite's concubine out to the men to protect themselves, and she was brutally assaulted throughout the night. This incident highlights not only the cruelty of the perpetrators, but also the failure of society to protect the vulnerable. Terrible consequences. The Levite's actions afterward were even more shocking. He dismembered the body of his concubine into 12 pieces and sent them to the tribes of Israel as a call to action. This act sparked outrage and led to a devastating civil war between the tribes of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin. The war resulted in thousands of deaths and nearly led to the extinction of the tribe of Benjamin, one of Israel's key tribes. Lessons and significance of the story. This story, though deeply tragic, offers us valuable lessons in examining personal responsibility, the value of human life, and our relationship with God. Personal and social responsibility. The moral decline depicted in this story isn't just the fault of one individual, but of society as a whole. When there is no leadership or accountability, people easily fall into moral decay and make disastrous decisions. At that time, Israel had no king, and everyone did what they thought was right in their own eyes. This lack of order and moral guidance was one of the main reasons for the chaos and ethical collapse of society. In modern times, we can see similar consequences when there is a lack of oversight and responsibility. Corruption, injustice, and violence are clear manifestations of this absence of accountability. For example, corruption in government, the abuse of power by leaders, or the irresponsibility of citizens can lead to severe consequences for the entire society. The story in the book of Judges is a reminder that maintaining a just and moral society requires responsible leadership and self-awareness from each individual. Human value and ethics. The events in Gibeah were not just acts of brutality, but also a reflection of the loss of human value. The decision of the Levite and the old man to send out the concubine to protect themselves clearly demonstrated a disregard for the sanctity of life and dignity of another human being. In a society where human value is diminished, such inhumane acts become all too common. This forces us to reflect on how we treat each other in today's society. Are we truly valuing each individual, or are we prone to disregard others in times of difficulty? This is a question that each of us needs to ask ourselves. The story of the Levite and his concubine is a stark warning of how disregarding human value can lead to catastrophic outcomes. The consequences of straying from God. When people distance themselves from God and lose their spiritual connection with Him, they become susceptible to actions they never imagined they would commit. The story in the book of Judges is a clear example of this, where Israel's moral decline reached its peak, resulting in horrific consequences. Straying from God not only weakens spiritual bonds, but also erodes the moral foundation needed to maintain a just and humane society. In modern life, we also see similar consequences when people lose their faith and moral compass. Sinful behaviors, crimes, and moral degradation are inevitable when people no longer adhere to higher spiritual values. We must recognize the importance of maintaining a close relationship with God and upholding ethical values to steer clear of the paths that lead to ruin. Applying the lessons to modern life. The story in the book of Judges isn't just a historical narrative. It carries timeless lessons that are highly relevant to our contemporary lives. Here are some ways in which the lessons from this story can be applied to modern issues. Domestic violence. One of the modern issues that this story relates to is domestic violence. Domestic violence is a severe and widespread problem in many societies today. The story of the Levite and his concubine is a clear illustration of violence and disrespect within family relationships. The concubine became a victim of violence and a lack of protection, which mirrors the situation of many women in today's society. In many cases, domestic violence goes unreported, and victims do not receive the necessary support. This is similar to how the Levite's concubine was not protected or saved in her tragic situation. We need to create a society where everyone is responsible for protecting each other and where no one is left to be abused or harmed. We also need to raise awareness of this issue and ensure that victims of domestic violence receive the help and protection they need. Personal and social responsibility. Every decision we make has consequences, and this is not just true in the context of the Bible story, but also in our daily lives. The story of the Levite and the ensuing civil war is a reminder that we must carefully consider our decisions, because even small mistakes can lead to serious consequences. In our work, family, and social relationships, we must take responsibility for our actions. When making decisions, we need to think about the long-term impacts and possible consequences, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. To avoid unwanted outcomes, we must learn to make wise and responsible decisions, especially in challenging situations. Moral and religious values in modern society. In today's world, where moral and religious values are constantly being challenged and changed, the story in the book of Judges is an important reminder of the significance of upholding these values. We live in an increasingly complex world where traditional values are under threat. However, core moral and religious values must be maintained to ensure societal stability and justice. In this context, educating the younger generation about moral and religious values is crucial. We need to help them understand the importance of maintaining faith and living by these values in their daily lives. By doing so, we can ensure that our society does not fall into the same moral decay that the Israelites experienced in the book of Judges. Leadership and management responsibility. One of the critical lessons from this story is the importance of leadership and management responsibility. When there is no clear leadership or management, society can quickly fall into chaos and decay. This is true not only in the historical context of Israel, but also in modern organizations and societies. In organizations, whether in business or government, having a strong and responsible management system is essential to maintaining stability and growth. Leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about being accountable for those decisions and ensuring they serve the common good. We can draw lessons from this story to improve how we manage and lead in our daily lives. Conclusion and final message. The story in the book of Judges isn't just a historical account. It's a mirror reflecting the moral decay of a society without leadership and responsibility. Although the story ends with the tribe of Benjamin being rebuilt, the price paid was enormous. This serves as a reminder that every decision we make has consequences, and we must take responsibility for our actions. Through this story, I encourage you to reflect on the importance of maintaining a relationship with God, upholding personal responsibility, and respecting the value of every human being. The decisions we make today will shape the future for ourselves and those around us. Therefore, we should always consider our choices carefully and strive towards higher spiritual values. In our modern world, where change and challenges are inevitable, holding on to moral and religious values is essential to ensure that we do not stray from the right path. Remember, even when our decisions lead to unintended consequences, God's grace is always there, offering us the opportunity to correct our mistakes and learn from them.